Tomb Raider. In a jungle safari lived an old evil sorcery, Houdini. He was an old odd fellow, and an outcast. An outcast to his people. The people in the jungle, who had settled there. One day a famous explorer named Laura Croft visited this jungle in search for a mysterious relic called the Golden Mask. An ancient relic that would give its possessor lots of riches if sold. So Laura was a famous archaeologist and sought it nonetheless. On her arrival there were townspeople that gave grave warnings on the strange activity of the sorcery that lived near them. And she heeded their many warnings, and the warnings of the dangers of the jungle, including animals, plants, and sicknesses. So she proceeded with caution and continued venturing. Laura ventured into a dark cave and set up her camp. And made a stay for the night. Suddenly she woke in the middle of the night and heard gunfire and the villagers in the jungle screaming. She peered out of the cave toward the village where the villagers stayed and saw smoke rising from the sky. She knew a group of mercenaries must have been after the artifact she was after too had learned of the Golden Mask location. And she grabbed her handgun, flashlight, and first aid kit for mobile, and headed out, sneaking under the bushes. She was clothed with a long blue sweater and brown pants. She left the rest of her belongings in her camp in the cave, and proceeded heading out. As Laura walked along the bushes, in the shadows of the jungle, she witnessed a local warlord talking to his men, telling them to torture the locals and burn down the jungle until they found the Golden Mask. Laura analyzed her situation, and headed back to camp and forged materials. She wasn't going to leave the jungle without a fight. So Laura salvaged some wood, made a table, and started crafting arrows and a bow with the materials she had at hand. She used her knife, and some poisonous plants, string she tore, and used wood as a point. Laura Croft was ready. She climbed a tree near the village where she first stayed and stayed in the cover of the dark. She saw two mercenaries watching a vehicle they had arrived in, and saw that the rest of the warlord's men had gone out to their duties. And Laura aimed her poison bow at the two henchmen, first on the right, and practiced in quiet for several minutes to transition to the one on the left, so she wouldn't make any noise, or get fired upon. So she aimed her poison bow and hit one henchman in the left leg, the other was all-aimed and screamed who did that, and called for backup. Laura nearly slipped off the tree and remained high, away from their sight. She waited. And after a few minutes no one had arrived yet. And she pulled out her handgun and began to open fire on the henchman. And he was killed. And Laura went down, and took the men's weapons and vehicle and continued exploring the jungle. She took their clothes, hid her ponytail, and hid her face with a scarf so she would fit in with the rest of them. All that remained was her light skin, so she bought her look and headed out. While on the road she saw much commotion of the villagers, locals, doctors and children of the village and continued heading out. There were many guards, for she knew that the mask promise of riches had attracted their attention. Laura knew she was outgunned and out of ideas. So she followed what the guards were doing, and they were holding the villages in a hunt away, and the others that scurried out were nowhere to be found. So Laura got out of the vehicle, and got ready for a guerrilla war. She counted 30 men in the local village, and knew that there would be less out, so she out her rifle on semi, and got ready to pick them apart. Laura painted her face with the mud, and sticked to the shadows, using the jungle's darkness that night to her advantage. She followed a foot trail, and continued going the most logical way along the path she believed they would go. As she followed, she witnessed a group of 10 men questioning the local sorcery on the Golden Mask location, and he had it in his possession and pulled it out from his side. They laughed and gave the location of their boss, 2 miles west. So Laura put her rifle on automatic, safety off, and opened fire on them all, including the old man's sorcery. And they all 11 were killed, and she took the Golden Mask and left the warlord. Laura wanted to liberate the village, so she returned back to the village, after drinking some water from a mud puddle, that she heated up with some fire she had gathered. So Laura proceeded to the village and went back to gather the men's ammo, and made some weapon adjustments and picked up a silencer. She was excited that she wouldn't get caught, and decided to leave the guards in the village for last, and went west for 2 miles until she stumbled upon the warlord arguing with some villagers on the Golden Mask location which she had now. He had 4 guards, each with miniguns and wheel-armored, and Laura knew it would take more than a mission gun to take them out. So she simply went for the warlord and aimed her gun at him at his head, and pulled her trigger, and the men with the guns began shooting wildly at the villagers, and in the bushes and trees. And luckily a local leopard came out of the bushes and jumped at one of the guards and kept biting him. Laura took this opportunity to rush one of the guardsmen and took off his mask and shot him with her pistol. The same with the other, and they didn't notice because they were too distracted by the huge leopard. Laura shot the leopard too, reloaded, and saw the wounded and shocked guardsman, and removed his mask fully, and began interrogating him. He gave up the location to their main hideout, and told her their motives and how they're well funded, and on a search around the globe for special artifacts like her, but are responsible for drugs, slaves, prostitution and political corruption in many places. So she remembered what he had said, and took a minigun and blasted the wounded guardsman, head and all. And Laura grew tired, and met up with a few villagers, and they thanked her for saving them, and fed her, and allowed her to stay the rest of the night there. When Laura awoke well rested, she was greatly sore and could hardly move. She let a few days pass, until she was strong enough to head back out, and she knew no reinforcements would come, because she took their one of less cars, and they wouldn't leave until they had acquired the golden mask, which was worth a lot of money. So Laura used her first aid kit, and was ready for a village return. She took only her pistol and arrow, and left the assault rifle and miniguns. As Laura made it back to the village with her car that she got back in where she had parked it, she saw the henchmen still there waiting, without reinforcements. And she hid behind the vehicle, aimed her rifle at about 3, and began opening fire. She took 2 out and the other ran behind cover. Later, 10 men came and opened fire at the car. But Laura had snuck around while the man had left and ran in cover, and got a good view of the village's problem. They had blocked the roads, and we're holding the village under siege. So Laura watched and waited back while the guardsmen walked toward the vehicle looking for a kill. And Laura picked up 2 rifles and opened fire at the rest that had not and killed them all. The others had ran into the jungle believing the fire had come from there. Their communication was off, and the men had died in quietness and quickly. And Laura searched the village and saw the villagers, and they joined her and agreed to defend and aid the village without her. And Laura headed out and went back to the airport she had arrived in. She went to the doctors and went home and got ready for another expedition against the mercenary and tyrannical group she had learned about. The name Desperado.